There is a reason I keep returning to the theme of communication and the information flow in the CAA show. Because in the day and age we live, consumption of information and what kind of information we are consuming and its quality is as important, if not more, than the food we consume. The amount of time we spend ingesting information in front of our laptops, cell phones, and television sets is extraordinary. Now, when it comes to food, don't we monitor our intake and health by periodically testing ourselves for tests like lipid profile? Similarly, it is important to monitor the information flow for health checks, especially when there is a suspicion that the information tap has been retooled or the well of information itself has been poisoned. I am talking of the case of Twitter and NDTV, and it is important we discuss these entities and their shortcomings, if any. Because at the end of the day, these are companies, corporates, and all companies come under the ambit of public scrutiny. And a close examination of these corporates reveals that in the case of Twitter, certainly in the past, and in NDTV's case, both in the past and in the present, there is so much wrongdoing in every sense of the word. I will discuss all that in a minute, but first, a warm welcome to all viewers of the CAA show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis, and my name is Juggi Bhasin. To watch this video podcast, press the big red subscriber button on your screen, and subscription is, of course, completely free. Now, let us first begin by understanding the case of Twitter. Elon Musk today made a shocking statement that Twitter, under the old dispensation, was nothing less than a crime scene. Prepare yourself for more shocking revelations to emerge. But already, the muck and dirt that has been unearthed is stunning in its scope and depth of how deep the rot had gone. And these crimes, to use Musk's descriptive word, were both of commission and omission. Twitter, as perhaps the world's most formidable communication engine, was being used to suppress dissent and political opinion in the United States. This engine was also being used to galvanize dissent for agitations in other parts of the world, especially in India, especially as we remember during the height of the CAA and the Kisan agitation. In short, the role of Twitter as a neutral umpire had been discarded, and it had become a party to fomenting trouble for political dispensations it did not like and subverting information flow favorably for entities of its liking. To do that, it employed the tool of what is called shadow banning. In this method, technology was used to hoodwink and subvert the posts of Twitter users whose views and political orientation were not compatible with those of Twitter. It meant that the account of the Twitter user would be retained, but all chats or communications around that person generated by people interested in that person or even opposed to that person would be removed. It meant that the concerned person had no way of knowing that the ecosystem and chats around him had been suppressed. I will give you a striking example of what really was going on in Twitter during the first phase of the COVID pandemic. We all remember how Dr. Fauci ruled the waves at that time with his policy of no schools for children and confinement at home for practically everyone. Now, subsequent studies and research have shown that the policy of no schools for children and confinement at home was playing with the mental health of children. Many children even today are bearing the ill effects of being needlessly confined at home during that time. Now we all know which political side Dr. Fauci aligned himself to eventually. So, at that time, a very eminent Stanford University professor of health policy, Dr. Juggi Bhasin, had questioned this entire policy of lockdowns and had raised the issue of how it would harm children. And what did Twitter do? They used shadow banning and put him on their trends blacklist, which prevented his tweets from trending. Now understand the implications of all this. If Dr. Bhattacharya's tweets had gone into circulation, then perhaps a real debate would have started on the efficacy of the lockdown policy and its harmful impact on children. But nothing of the sort happened. His voice was suppressed and the tone-deaf policy of Fauci carried the day. And the raging mental health issues for children came after that. In India also, NDTV has been continuing for a long time a similar kind of campaign against the present government with its own version of shadow banning. It gives only a viewpoint that is inimical to the government and very openly suppresses the other side. Even if it shows the other side, it puts on air unknown, barely communicable, even discredited votaries of that side to completely trash and discredit the government point of view. One could still tolerate all this, but they crossed all limits in 3 events with biased, suppressive, and some would even say malignant coverage designed to arouse passions and unrest. The first was, of course, the COVID pandemic, where day in and day out they stationed camera teams at cremation grounds and in hospital ICUs to almost 10x project the horrors of the COVID pandemic. To say it would create ill will against the government would be an understatement. It was a time when so little was known of the virus and what kind of hospital care to roll out that to expect any government in the world, and not ours either, to be on the top of things would be to expect a miracle. NDTV conveniently chose to ignore all these facts. It worked on an agenda, planting stories against the government day in and day out, giving the impression that dead bodies were littering city streets. They repeated the same perfidy during the CAA and the Kisan agitation and the Delhi riots. They practically ensured a round-the-clock coverage from Shaheen Bagh, and the most lurid stories of communal unrest were put out on their channel. In the Kisan agitation, they sided with the strikers and completely ignored the blockages and the economic loss stories and hardship to the common people from the unrest. All these agitations were magnified, as I have said, 10x times, as if the entire country was on fire. They repeated the same pattern during the limited Chinese aggression in Ladakh by painting a picture as if entire chunks of northern territories had been run over by the Chinese. I could go on and on about their biases, but let me give you a context to this distortion these people have indulged in. News broadcasting by private networks is not a public service which is the eminent domain only of Doordarshan. At the same time, private broadcasting is not an ultra-vires kind of situation where one can get away with anything. There is a strict broadcasting code for these channels and they are supposed to adhere to it. It's a different matter. Channels like NDTV are almost always in violation of it. Secondly, the issue is not about freedom of the press as the supporters of NDTV are fond of projecting. At the end of the day, these channels are dealing with information and news, which is also a product. And this product is put out in the market, not as a public service, but a product we choose and buy. When we purchase a product from the market, we look at its specifications before buying it. The product maker is also mandated by the regulator to show on the wrapping that what all the product contains. Now, if NDTV wants to peddle a one-sided unidimensional product, then fine, no problems about it, do it. But at the same time, it is duty-bound and obliged to inform its viewers and subscribers that it only carries one-sided stories. That is all. Twitter had to do in the past and NDTV must do in the present not to cross the red lines and stay above board. You can't have your own biased coverage's cake and eat it too, and then pretend that you are a champion of free speech. That is not only dishonest, but it is downright wrong and mischievous. If you have an affiliation with a certain political party or ideology, please show that on your channel and let the public choose. Don't use the umbrella of freedom of expression for your own brand of political and social activism. Hopefully, the time for that kind of manipulation will finally be coming to an end. And so, on this note, I come to the end of this episode of the CAA show. I hope you'll really like this particular episode. If you like our show, do subscribe to us. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.